the reason why we're all here tonight, I'm going to do a quick introduction. If by some means you don't already know them, you will after the introduction and after tonight. So bear with me. There's a laundry list of things that these two fine folks have done, so it'll take me some time to get through them. But we're going to start with David Kunsel, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
DC here. So Performable, Ghostery, Compete, HubSpot, Drift, Lookery. What do all these companies have in common? David Cancel. David's a serial entrepreneur. He's a podcast host of Seeking Wisdom. 6 stars if you haven't listened to it, go ahead. And an angel investor and advisor. He's best known for creating hypergrowth products and teams at the companies I mentioned. He's been featured on probably too many media outlets to count. Some of those include New York Times, Forbes, Fortune, Wired, Fast Company, and he's guest lectured on entrepreneurship at Harvard, MIT, Bentley, and a ton of other universities. You can read and follow more with David at his website, davidcancel.com. It's being read by over 1 million entrepreneurs, and his Twitter account, dcancel, which has over 130,000 followers. He's definitely a must-follow in the startup tech community. Thank you very much for being here today. David Cancel joins us all the way from Boston. So quick round of applause for David. All right.
By the way, I was both pitching and poaching.
Okay, deal. We can make some exceptions for everyone. If you want to open an office here in Toronto. All right, Daniel DeBow. I know Daniel DeBow pretty well, considering that I should probably mention this. I work for him. But the good thing is tonight we've kind of set boundaries. And tonight, whatever happens outside of here does not affect the relationship. Daniel DeBow is the CEO and co-founder of Helpful Video Messenger for Professionals. Most recently, he was SVP of Emerging Technologies at Salesforce. Who hasn't worked there? Previously, Daniel was the co-founder and co-CEO of Ripple, which was acquired by Salesforce in 2011. And prior to that, he was on the founding team of WorkBrain, which was acquired by Infor in 2007. Daniel's made over 50 angel investments. And in 2015 was recognized as Canada's Angel Investor of the Year. He holds a JD MBA from the University of Toronto, a Master's in Law and Science and Technology from Stanford, and a BA in Psychology from Western University. Go Laurier Golden Hawks. He is an adjunct professor at the Faculty of Law at U of T. He's a founding partner of CDL, Creative Destruction Lab at Rotman School of Management. He's the founder of Root Down Studios and serves as advisory board of Ophthalmic Labs, Rotman School, Mount Sinai Hospital, the Lindenfeld Tenenbaum Research Institute, Omer's Ventures, and Scale Ups. Okay, thank you both for joining us today. Woo! Yes. I'm super fucking pumped to have these two guys here. It's amazing. Let's jump into things. So before we get into the detail, I want to get to know you guys a bit better. You can turn on your mics. DC, let's start with you. Tell us what your focus is on the moment at Drift, what you do day to day, where you spend your time.
No pitching. I don't know.
No pitching.
Where do I spend my time? So I'm building a company called Drift, which is my 5th company, and I spend most of my time trying to figure out how we reinvent the marketing and sales funnel, right, and the whole process. So I don't know what else to say.
What do you do? Where do you spend most of your time right now?
Recruiting, patting people on the back, making sure they're okay, making sure we're not at a sushi lunch,
yep.
All the important things, making sure sales reps are paid, they're buying boats, all of that kind of stuff. That's what I spend my time doing.
Daniel, what about you?
When I spend my time, that just reminds me of a joke. When I was, not a joke, it's a true story. When I started recruiting for WorkBrain, the first thing I did was hire salespeople, and I remember Steve DeBacco said, find salespeople who have boats and horses because
Absolutely.
They definitely need to make the money for this job.
I was telling that to someone earlier. It was like, I could judge the week by the number of shoes that the female sales reps are buying that week.
Some good tips and tricks, folks.
If they're Louis or not.
What am I focused on now, other than driving you crazy every day, pretty much? I'm focused on Helpful. Helpful is this new application. It's a super way to engage people at work. And we're, as you know the answer to this question. We haven't publicly gone crazy and launching the product. We're just sort of slowly letting people build it up. So we spend our day on talking to customers, talking to prospects, listening to their pains, trying to figure out the crazy passionate ones. There's someone right beside me, like the people who use it all the time, what do they love about it? How do we describe that to new customers? And all the normal things of building up the infrastructure of a business, customer success, onboarding customers, product, making sure we're building up all the other parts of the business. That's kind of what I'm focused on.
And sushi.
And we do, yeah, making sure sushi's there. Yes, we
Okay.
do. We have a sushi restaurant pretty much downstairs.
Okay.
DC, so in episode 55, Seeking Wisdom, you talked a bit about
This is your life.
I don't know what I said.
Well, I'll tell you what you said. You talked about the transformation of sales.
Sure.
Right, so you've been in the game for quite some time now.
Ages.
And I want to hear from you personally. Like, what's evolved over the last 20 years or so that you've seen transpire in your companies, and how are you doing things differently than what you did, back in early 2000s?
Yeah, so I'd say what's changed in the sales funnel, I'd say not much in the way that we sell. So if we look at our sales and marketing motions, they're pretty much the same for the last 15 years. So I've been building marketing and sales software that entire time. So it's pretty much the same. I think the big thing that's changed is the way that all of us buy things as consumers, and our expectations have radically changed. And so I do this thing where I ask 100% of the salespeople that I meet, whether they're BDRs, VPs, managers, reps, AEs, whatever, and marketing people, the same 3 questions. Do you fill out forms and download white papers? They laugh at me. I say, do you answer emails that say, do you have 15 minutes with a Giphy in it? They laugh at me. And I say, do you answer phone calls from people that you don't know? And then they laugh at me. And I say, but those are the only 3 things you do in your motion all day.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's it. You don't do anything else, right? But we've reached peak insanity if all of us are laughing and saying we don't respond to any of those things. So something has got to change, and that's what we're focused on, understanding how that changes. And I think a couple of mega trends. I'm big on mega trends, which I talk about a lot. One is messaging.
Yep.
Right? Video is one, messaging one. But then a third one is that we expect everything on demand in real time. And every B2B business, whether you're top 100 in the world or SMB, it's pretty much the same. You have a motion that is basically get someone to the website, fill out a form, and maybe 3 weeks later, an inbound SDR kind of follows up with them. And in every other way of our life, that's insanity.
Yeah.
Right? So that has to change.
Yep.
Kenny Goldman, when you were in grade 7, you got sent to the principal. I'd like to talk what's changed since then. I was waiting the whole question to do that.
What hasn't changed? Daniel, what hasn't changed?
We just had what we did there, what we have.
Yeah.
Relationships. Relationships have not changed. That is the thing that I think is still the thing that separates the absolutely amazing sales performers from the ones who just kind of get by. And that, I don't think that's going to change for a long time. The tools and motions, exactly, about how you get, because think about it, everything you just described is about a precursor to try and get to a genuine human engagement, a human emotion, right? That's everything. And once you can engage with someone, then you talk to them all the different channels, right? And depending on who the customer is, depending on obviously the ticket size and the sale length and the duration, you might engage in different ways, but you're still building a relationship. That's the core thing that I think hasn't changed. That I've had to learn from the very beginning, which is how do you actually connect with someone and do that. Right?
We're seeing less.
All the challenger sale, all that other stuff happens. Everything that happens there happens because you build a relationship of trust with someone.
Yeah. We're seeing less and less things like field sales. People are not expected to come to the site. We see the resurgence or surgence of PQLs now, CQLs, and things like that. And so how people buy has absolutely changed. When you're starting to build a sales team, when you're looking for those first few reps, DC, what do you look for, right? What sort of traits or what characteristics really define an early stage sales rep? And Emmanuel talked about this.
Yeah.
We had Emmanuel Scala, right? The difference between missionaries and mercenaries. So can you explain that a bit, and also talk about, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think so. Emmanuel, someone that we had on the podcast, who's an old friend, she talked about building, and she was at I forgot the name of the company, DigitalOcean at the time, building that sales team, and she said that she looks for these missionaries, right, versus these mercenaries. Someone that's going to come in on the missionary side and may be okay with not having a process set up, not having training set up, your script kind of changing or your pitch changing every single day. And that was true for us. So when we brought in our sales team in January of this year, we started to build it out. We were changing our pitch daily, on a daily cadence, right? And we had half a dozen people at that time who were capable of doing that, which is amazing. So every day we cuddle back up, learn, change, adapt, back out. And so and then we just had that cadence. The team is probably, 18 reps right now. and trying to hire another 30, but they have that same cadence. They say won't. But this is Toronto, so.
Yeah. Did it start with the VP of Sales? So Armin, did
Yes.
he come in January and then he led the team and built it out, or did you start with the first few hires?
I started with the first few hires myself, and then we brought in a VP of Sales. His name is Armin.
And when did you bring him in? How many reps were there?
Two reps were in there, and but we didn't know if it was fully repeatable at this point because the founders, myself and my other co-founder, were involved in all the processes, right?
Yeah.
And so we brought him to see if someone from the outside could actually keep this thing going. And so what was great about him was, and this is a whole different question, like what does the right VP of Sales look like at the early stage? He was someone who had been a VP of Sales multiple times, but had worked he was a VP of Sales at LogMeIn,
Yep.
and early LogMeIn, and so had this kind of PQL kind of motion, and he didn't want to run out and build an army of BDRs. He didn't want to go out and have an army of reps. He wanted to be really, really methodical about building that team out, and so that totally aligned with what we needed at that time. So, and he's more player coach than anything else.
Yeah, so he's involved in the deals day to day.
Every single day, every day.
And did you guys build out a lot of the unit economics before bringing in Armin? Or did you not necessarily know exactly how much a rep costs, how much they can bring in? You put that on his plate.
Yeah, we didn't build those out, but I mean, we had done this at HubSpot and a couple other companies, so we kind of knew, what LTV CAC needs to look like and all this kind of stuff, but we actually didn't really care about this stuff. It's the wrong time to optimize at this point. At that point, at the beginning of the year, what we wanted was for him to come in and see what we were capable of, because our motion was different in that we were 100% inbound. We still are, right? So every deal that comes in is an inbound deal, which is not normal. All of our reps close deals using our own software, which is a whole different way of closing. And so we didn't have any data for that. And what we saw pretty early with our first couple of reps were that they were ramping in within a month to full quota attainment. And so we're like, something's wrong. Okay, like that's not gonna work. And so we started to scale the team. We're like 18 now. That's still the norm. Everyone does it in under a month. They close the deal in the first week. And we have that kind of cadence, which is not normal. At some point it will break. And but we wanted to see how repeatable that was.
Yeah. And Daniel, similar to you, what are some things you look for? Ripple, helpful, WorkBrain?
Yeah, so it's funny, I think the missionary one that you described was the missionary and mercenary. I think about like the MacGyver, right? Like especially because, certainly early on, you sort of alluded to it, right? Like, the missionaries, I think they're already able to articulate, but in the very early stages, you need people who can deal with the ambiguity of the situation, they can deal with the iteration and learning, but they can also deal with the fact that there is not an army of people, a tail behind them, who can build the tools that they need to support themselves. And it's not just the ability, it's not just that MacGyver could build stuff, it actually worked, right? It always seemed to blow up, right? And so similarly, I think, I'm going to put him on the spot, embarrass him, like David Primer, who's over here. Oh, sorry, buddy, I couldn't help it. Well, I've been through it multiple times. We did it at WorkBrain, where he led our SC team, and then when he joined us at Ripple, he actually joined as product manager, right? It was so general purpose. He could solve a bunch of problems, but then it was like, okay, we need to set exactly that pivot. We need to start selling. And it was exactly that, walking in the room every day. But the thing with David and with Kenny, and we just brought Dan on, they're people who can actually create their own stuff. And that's crucial in the very first, the 2 reps before you hire the VP, because you do not have the ability, even if you have marketing people, to kind of help them through that hand-holding, which are very, not custom deals, but you really got to be doing that process of learning what's working, what's the objection, how do I redo the pitch for the next story so that it's going to work.
Yeah, 100%. They had nothing those early reps. I mean, we're up to 18 reps. We don't have a sales ops person. We don't have marketing ops. We don't have anything. Right? We just have reps closing deals. We have no specialization, right? And so these people, and they own Upgrade, so they're doing the account management part of it as well, or pseudo account management. And so these people can do everything. Right? They're kind of not normal.
Yeah.
So just one thing you were at, to answer your question also, they're not normal. How do you know who those people are? And frankly, for you, if you're thinking about you want to join an early stage, so how do you signal, frankly, to the market that that's you? I'll put Kenny on the spot. They do things like this, right? You ask someone, when have you created something that didn't exist? And I'll just take a pause to say, I can't freaking believe this thing. He's like, yeah, no, SalesTO, I wrote this little thing. I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. It did not exist 10 years ago. I was just commenting, it didn't exist, this kind of community. It's amazing. But the fact that Kenny could do that is a super good indicator that he could be given a blank slate of like, hey, I don't know what we're selling. I'm not really sure what the pitch is. Like, we've got some people using this thing, but let's find out. And then be able to iterate to that. And frankly, I had actually met you when you were at Vidyard early on, and I mean, both of us were actually in the same college fraternity, but I knew he had been the president of his chapter. Now, it's not about being a fraternity, it's about the fact that I look for someone who has the ability to be president of their club, captain of their football team, something inside their life that demonstrates that they make stuff happen. That's it. Like, that's a really simple indicator. If you want to convince someone who's a CEO, oh, you should join me as your rep number one, you have to have that extra thing that demonstrates you're going to be a MacGyver or a missionary.
Yeah, and you both talk about like insatiable learning. Like both of you anchor on that so much, right? Just like learning every single day. If there's anything you're getting out of this journey, learn one day, apply it the next day. Learn, apply it the next day. And you talked about a good story on a different podcast with Mike Chan about an inside sales reps that you had early on at Performable and her impact to the organization.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
So Performable was my company before, which was acquired by HubSpot, which is how I went to HubSpot early on. And so we were all engineers, all product people, right? We had built a product in marketing automation, right? At that point, this was in 2009 through 11. And so we were all about the touchless sale. We're going to A/B test everything, like, like total. Have you heard this before? Yeah. and that actually was working. We had gotten critical mass for us early in that, and then at some point, all we cared about was the feedback loop. So I'm obsessed with the feedback loop, and how do we shorten the feedback loop? And I think about the way that I built products. I was an engineer a very long time ago. No one believes, but like, and it's all about like this feedback loop, because we live in this, we're all creating companies and whatever, even if you sell hardware, software, or beverages or whatever, in a world where you can have real-time contact with customers 24/7, 365 across the world. Yep. And that wasn't true when I was building software a long time ago. So we should do everything to exploit that, right? That's the advantage that we all have, where we all kind of do motions and do things that don't use that, which is insane. So yeah, totally. So I said, let's hire a sales rep, right? And people are like, oh, crazy. I said, but let's just hire this person for 3 months with the idea that all we're going to do is validated learnings, right? We're all sat in a room like this in a big table, and we could hear, her name was Heidi, she was amazing, and we could hear her on the phone, because at that point we were doing phone, and we could hear, what did she say when people picked up the phone and they kept talking? What did she say when they picked up and everyone hung up? And so we were like, holy shit, this real-time A/B testing. And so we're listening to what she's saying. Okay,
no pressure on
Heidi. Yeah, no pressure. Oh, wow, this thing is working. So we're basically looking, because everything's like, we're looking for a hook. Okay, that hook worked. Okay, next hook, the next hook doesn't work. So we're just validating it. And we were taking the learnings, like that opening hook that was working for her, and then we'd be like, update the website, change the website, copy on the website, call to action is the hook, right? And then we do the second hook. And we actually had built an A/B testing, multivariate testing tool as part of what we were doing. And so we were testing all the stuff that she was doing, that she was validating. And then, by the way, then she started to close a lot of deals, right? And we're like, oh, that's amazing. And then she drove our ASP up from, I don't know, a couple $100 MRR level to $5,000 MRR levels pretty quickly. Yeah, so pretty quickly. Yep. And so we said, oh, we need to get more of these. Let's get some more. But what was amazing about her was that she was willing to come in and only work for 3 months, because we told her it was an experiment. We didn't know what the comp plan was supposed to be. We didn't have anything for her to read. We didn't have a pitch. We didn't have anything. So it was just like, come in. We didn't have a phone. So we had to figure out how to get a phone, right? Like, we had nothing. And she was willing to do all that stuff, which is like that shit crazy, right? Like, for an experienced rep. And she did it, and she crushed it. She was our #1 rep. And she was a pretty good rep within HubSpot as well until she left there.
Open to ambiguity.
Yes.
And I'm noticing that there's not a lot of numbers here, right? If you don't have a sales ops person, you're not evaluating every single deal by the numbers. It's much more qualitative.
I think people are, so like, I don't know, at Performable, super data-driven, although I don't talk about that stuff, we could talk about it all day. And at HubSpot, like, insanely data-driven, right? We measured every little thing. But I think we put too much weight on some of that stuff, and we over-optimize on some of those things. Like, how do you know something's working? It's pretty clear when it's working, right? It's like, So I always say these things like people are just got so blinded by the numbers and let's do a survey and let's figure out, let's put it in Excel. And it's like, I don't need to like use a survey to figure out if Kenny's happy right now or he's sad, right? Like it's pretty freaking simple. And whether this marketing channel is working or not, because every prospect that's coming in is saying, hey, by the way, I heard you on Mike Chan's podcast and that's how I found you guys. So do I need to have an attribution model to work? No, because everyone is just walking in and saying, this is the reason you come in. If you just listen, which is what we do, everything around conversations, it's pretty clear on what's working, what's not working.
Especially at the early stage. It's just the sample sizes are too small. You don't have enough data, and it is a classic thing. I mean, I walk around, I'm like, okay, put away the spreadsheet, thank you very much. Like, it's good, you're gonna get, like most things in life, you're gonna get most of your analysis out of the first 20 minutes. That you like do some rough numbers on the board, or you just write a few down. Like deep dives into like Looker for sales. It's not gonna really help you, and you're exactly right. You're looking at early stages for like super strong signals, right? Things that move the dial. Oh, you change that, that's 60% conversion improvement at this stage, something like that. Yeah. And the learning thing is, but both of us, I think, are adherents of, you know, our friend Eric Ries has this line, right? That a startup is a learning machine.
Totally.
He's like, this is the biggest thing, right? Like, you know, you asked why we're learning about this. Is like. And it was actually two things from Eric. It was really interesting. About 10 years ago, he wrote this book called The Lean Startup. He has a new book out now. It's great. And it was right around the time that Agile software was coming out. And he's like, I'm really worried that this doesn't become like a cargo cult, right? Where everybody just follows the practices, but they don't understand that this all came from like this Toyota lean production system. And it's really about just philosophically understanding the idea of getting to value really quickly and respecting your people to figure out how to do that if you give them the right tools and environment. And so I do worry sometimes in the sales motion, especially early on, that they're like, I read this blog. Like it's great that events like this happen. It's great that there's like 8,000 blogs about every single kind of minutia that used to be there. But at some point, people stop thinking. And early on, that is death. Like you have to actually think, because no one has ever faced your startup or your selling startup situation before, because the product and the market are different, the time is different, like all these things are different. Like for example, you talked about being on the phone. Like there was a time that calling someone on the phone, believe it or not, was an ultra high signal, high response rate channel. That was great, you know? People who figured out how to use the phone to call prospects were genius salespeople. Over time, every channel starts to degrade as everybody else figures out how to get onto the channel. So you can't keep doing the same thing over and over. You have to look at what's happening around you. And this is unfortunate, especially if you want like an easy job. You actually have to figure shit out and try different things. And the only way you figure shit out, I think this is the big lesson, is you try shit. You do not know. Nobody is smart enough. I think I've been around a few times. The more I've been around, the more I realize I know little things. I don't know a lot. I actually don't know how to predict. I have good hypothesis and confidence in testing in a process that you just do this. You don't start from day one, and that's like death with early stage sales.
And both of you talk about this. Both of you talk about the notion of ideas and execution. And they're two very different things, right? And you know, someone can come to you with 100 ideas, but until you actually execute on something, you're not going to give any attention towards it, right?
No, I think I'm always ranting about that. I hate ideas. I'm sick of ideas. Because everyone only wants to talk to me about ideas. And it's like, I have a million ideas. Who cares about the ideas? There's no value in ideas. Like, there's only values in applying them and having a process to test them and iterate them. Like, so like ideas are useless. And I think people have been taught to overvalue ideas and to think like, oh, I'm going to do something when I have the right idea. And it's like, it's not actually how it works, right? Like, or I don't know how, I haven't seen that version of it. I only have seen that in movies and on TV, that you have these idea moments. Like, no, there's just like things that you want to try and you figure out how to test them. Yeah. That's the true creative process. So like, I always say like, if you go outside of technology, outside of what we all do, like there's two ends of the spectrum, there's science and there's arts. And in both, it's a game of iteration, right? It's a game of testing and trying, right? Picasso doesn't do one brush stroke and then that's the end of the painting. Like a writer doesn't type one word and that's the end. Is this off?
Make sure. Try that one.
No. Sorry.
There you go.
Now it's not. And so it's a game. Yeah. So it's a game of iteration, and same thing in science, right? Science is like test, test, test. Oh, I stumbled on something, and so the creation process is always the same, right? And it's no different in what we all do every day.
So is the idea for people who are early stage reps at companies, don't come to me with an idea. try it.
Yeah.
Try it with a few of your prospects.
Oh my God. Well, and also, like, you were talking about the categories, what you look for, we're talking about the MacGyver, but the other thing that is demonstrated is a bias to action, right? People who, exactly the inverse of like people who come around with ideas is people who are biased to action. They're like, hey, this thing's happening and I fixed it. Like, that's
They're like, oh my God, miracle, I love this
right.
person.
And
never happens.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a blog post about this GPSG, general purpose smart guy or gal. It's just the idea of like, you're not actually very clever if you go to your boss and say there's a problem. There are problems and ideas. It's like they're like assholes. Everyone has one. Okay, thank you very much. Doesn't really do much for me. And then there's like this ladder where you start to learn how to be confident enough to try something, figure out what it is, and solve the problem. Like those are the people who are consistently promoted, given more opportunity, get to create their career, get to do whatever they want. Are the people who show up with solutions. Like, I fixed this thing. Now, what's the next thing that we're going to go do? It does take a fair amount of confidence in. And it does take the right culture. It's a dual-sided thing where as a leader, my job is to try and contain the urge to yell and get upset and actually create a platform for people to make mistakes, right? And try and coach them with a very high standard, right? Very demanding standard, like not messing around, but at the same time trying to help them learn and let them try things, right? And get back and do the cycle really fast, as many times as you can. So the bias to action, if you don't have that, you're dead in an early stage organization. And for sales reps, 100%, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission in many cases. Go try something.
I think like everything, the common pattern is like everything that we'll talk about, once you have enough scar tissue, is just what we would all consider common sense. Yeah. But nobody has the common sense, right? So like that's where I spend most of my day, right? Back to your question, which is, stuff like, communication problems. People don't communicate, right? It's pretty simple, the answer. Like, Kenny is complaining because he doesn't know what Daniel's doing. So I say, Kenny, have you talked to Daniel? No. Why haven't you talked to Daniel? I'm too busy. Okay. Why don't you message him on Slack? Oh, Slack's crazy, it's too much, I can't figure it out, blah, blah, blah. Okay. How about you send him an email? No, I don't have time for email. How about you check the stuff that he wrote about what he's doing? I don't have time for that. I can't search the wiki. And it's like, okay. So then I walk people over and say, talk to this person. Right? As ridiculous as that sounds, that's what I would do. That's what I've done for years, thousands of times. Okay. And then it gets exaggerated. Well, Daniel's in Toronto, I'm in Boston, so I can't call him. Why not? Just call him. Okay. And then it's like, and people then start to create processes and things that linger within a company because they don't want to deal with the root cause of the problem, which is learn how to communicate to a person, right? Like you need to learn that. And so you end up with lots of project managers, lots of processes, lots of meetings, lots of all this stuff. And the root cause is very simple. Someone couldn't figure out how to communicate with this other person, or some group couldn't communicate. And so you build all of this crap and junk that doesn't work.
Is that an underappreciated skill?
Yeah, and I think the other thing about the process thing is you grow, especially in sales. I see this all the time. I think about experiences like just of like one thing that works at one point in that scale curve breaks very quickly down the line. But the impulse of people who are not constantly rethinking first principles as you're building the organization is to just make the more processy stuff. More process, please. So my favorite was I got a call from David Ossip at WorkBrain, and he's like, we got this problem, bugs are like piling up because we did a lot of custom high-end enterprise software, and we probably said yes to too many things early on, which you could do back then because you were basically took a year and a half to deliver software, and you had a lot of consultants. Anyhow, so we had a lot of bugs, and it was early on that we only had like 6 or 7 customers, and so I'm like, I don't know, how about we set up like a bug SWAT team? We'll meet every morning or once a week, and the SWAT team will get together and like they'll talk about the issues, and they'll prioritize amongst the project managers who gets the bug fix, whoever's yelling the loudest. Process, right? Lightweight, let's just do that. So I went away for a year, I went back to school, and I came back a year later, the company had grown like 200 people, went public, and we have a bug problem. But it's like way worse now, it's like way out of control. And so I'm like, okay, David the CEO says, why don't you try and see if you can figure out what's going on? And so I go down to this meeting, and I ask all the people, except it's not like the bug SWAT team anymore. Now it's like an armada of people, and there's literally, I'm not making this up, there's like a binder that outlines the process for bug escalation in the bug SWAT team meeting every day. And so I started at like, it's this long thing about point systems and which client would get it, and I would ask, so I just asked the question, I'm like, look around the table, I'm like, why are we doing this? Yeah. Because this is what we do. This is the process. And I said, how many of you have been here more than 9 months? And like 3 people put their hands up in the room. What happened was this like innocuous little thing that you did to solve a hack in one point, which made sense at the time, it spiraled out of control into this like basically customer satisfaction blocking process internally that people prayed to because they weren't thinking about what is the root cause. That, by the way, that was a customer success or bug issue. Same thing happens in sales all the time, especially with that lead flow through all those machines.
We're talking a lot about strategic stuff. I want to get into some of the tactical stuff that you do early stage to get the first few customers. What you have to do to attract the first few prospects, leads, when you don't have a product that's fully built out and a security team and enough resources and time to go into money and all those things. Some of the interesting things you do. And Emmanuel talked about some of these, right? So what are simple things that people can do? Well, maybe salespeople don't have a signature. Right, something like that. Just have a mirror at your desk and just make sure that you're always smiling on the phone. Simple things that she would implement today if she was in that role to make herself better. What have you seen? What have you seen some people do?
I've done so many early stage things. So for us, it's very simple. We start out before we have a product and we just ask people for money, right? So it's actually pretty simple. Right? Most entrepreneurs don't want to do that. So because they get caught up in this minutia. Well, how much? How do we price? What's the right metric? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, for us, it's like, it doesn't fucking matter. Just ask them for anything. This is how we've started multiple companies. So we go, someone has a problem, they seem engaged, they want to be a beta customer, and so we ask them, Kenny, how much money do you have on you? And they're like, what? And they're like, just give us whatever you have on. We have $20, $5, $100, whatever. And we have them for this company, we have them for past companies, on the wall and just put the name of the company on it. And that's it. And we will grandfather you forever, right? If you become a beta customer now and you give me just $20, and that's it, right? And people are like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense, and value, and this, and that. It's like we're chasing big markets. It doesn't really freaking matter. Yeah. And what matters is that we're trying to qualify the feedback that we're getting. Because the one thing that I learned pretty quickly was there are people are nice, and they don't want to say no, and so and for some reason they have ample time, I don't know why, so they take these meetings and they have more meetings and more meetings and more meetings. I don't know how they have so much fucking time. They're like, more meetings, and they seem really engaged, and so they're like, oh, and I need this, and it can't work here unless it does that, and this, and meet Bob and Sue, and this and that, and you're like, they're really interested. But the minute that you ask them for $5, it's over, right? Like they're not interested anymore. And it's comical, because it's like the minute you ask for $1, done, right? And so that's why I got down to, it didn't matter what the dollar amount was, because it was as easy as asking you for whatever you had in your pocket. That was enough to end the conversation. So that was our immediate qualifier and everything. And so all of us would go in, and we still do this today. Existing customer, they want to add something, we just make up a price and say, yeah, we'll get to that, it'll cost us much. And what we're doing is qualifying them. And most of those customers will say, oh, I got to talk to Daniel, he's my manager, I'll get back to you, but yeah, we're interested in that, we need that, and it's a game changer for us. And then they come back and they remain customers, and they never come back and ask for that thing. Yeah. Right? So we qualify them immediately.
Daniel?
Early customers, yeah. So similarly, walk around, talk to CEOs. In the case of this company, walk around. In the case of other companies, like you're trying, like the pattern of what I think you're hearing, that is one example, is you're trying to find validation that there's pain and value that you want people to commit to. And I think sometimes you find that by literally just saying, give me $5, like you're getting them to do some reciprocal. Sometimes you find it where you make them commit their resources. So, in our case, like we'll do right now, like I'll work with the customer. If they commit, a project manager who's on a phone call, they'll commit to this effort to roll it out, they'll do this thing. They're like, okay, well, they're taking some of their personal capital. Fine, you've got that. If they're not willing to do that, not willing to do that. There's no customer discovery that's happening. Right? In the case of Ripple, we did like customer, we were trying to get in through bottoms up user adoption. And we did like these like roundtables with millennials about feedback. And a bunch of people at every session started crying. They would like emotionally get into the fact that they didn't feel fulfilled at work and they weren't getting feedback. And we're like, okay, there's something there that is gonna make us like figure out how to get that itch, because that's a real thing that exists in people. If we just use it, it was a lever to get us in and ultimately figure out, but we didn't really know what the product was. We just figured our way iteratively to like, okay, this is the solution of what we have to build. And it was because we started with the user, the end user thing. So that gave validation in that way, I mean, lastly, the other validation is also investment. Like, so in the case of Helpful, when we walked around, we talked to people to try and validate our idea, and Volpe was like, okay, I'll give you money. People were like, I'll give you money, no problem. And, partially they're betting on us, which is, actually sort of not what you want in a perverse, weird way if you're doing this a few times. But you also know that they're saying that thing that you want to build is actually something that I would pay for. I want to be part of it.
And so you guys were hinting at somewhat of a self-service model. People come in, they pay. And right now, hot topic is freemium, enterprise. How do I decide? Can I do both? You've spoken about this a bit. So I know recently you guys split the funnel.
Yep.
Split between enterprise and freemium. Most people went the enterprise route. Can you talk a bit about that process, what triggered it, and what it looks like today?
Yeah, so we started out April 16 only with a touchless funnel. So everyone just comes in, it's freemium, there's a free product.
So there's no trial, just create an account today, start using it.
You can have a free product forever, and then you can upgrade to paid versions of that.
Just a credit card, go put in your details. And
that's it, easy.
No touch by a salesperson?
No touch ever, no touch by a human ever, right? And so they would just come in. And so we did that until the end. We still continue to do that, but we were only that promotion until the beginning of this year. And then we said, back to the experimentation thing, because one of the things, so we all repeat bad habits, right? So, and we forget the lessons, right? So that's why I do the podcast. It's just like, my podcast is just me actually talking to myself, right? And so is Twitter. So like, one of the things from that performable lesson was when we hired that sales rep, Heidi, was I said to myself, if I ever start another company, I'm hiring a sales rep from day one to validate the learnings. I started Drift, I did not hire a sales rep from day one. We went touchless again. And then finally at some point it was like, holy shit, we forgot to do this thing again. And so we hired someone and we started to validate and see what was happening there. And what we saw was the more mid-market, and we're really more mid-market and a little light enterprise right now, customer came in through that funnel, right? And so it totally makes sense. And this is how we came up with this idea of a CQL, which is a conversation qualified lead. Because you said, like, if we look at it, the people who are more likely to be higher ACV prospects are probably going to come in and want to talk to someone about some very specific thing, right? Like, hey, I'm looking at Helpful, I'm comparing it to this. Does it have this feature? I need this. We have a buying process going on. We have a committee, blah, blah, blah. They're not the people typically who are going to come in through a PQL process and install your little trial and mess around with it. They're probably not the person lingering your blog and filling out white paper forms all day long. And so, like, by the very nature of our product, we saw like people that were engaging there actually wanted to talk to a sales rep, right? Because they had very specific questions and were very qualified, and they were least likely to go into that freemium funnel. So we split the funnel, and it split itself naturally. Like these people that are higher ACV, they don't even go into the free product. They never even start there.
Yep.
Yeah. So they never start there. They go in and they want to talk to a rep from the beginning. So we have that split the funnel today.
Yeah. So two things I think about. One is the fact that this was like the source of a lot of learning and a lot of argumentation, frankly, at Ripple, and figuring out that exact right breakpoint, because exactly as what happens with you, like large enterprises, remember we talked about it before, they need relationships, you need to navigate, you're selling to a budget, it's just hard. And my experience was like enterprise reps actually don't like a freemium product because they don't get to define the solution, they don't get to define the use case, they don't get to define the demo, the perception. It's just like, hey, it all happens. And that's a challenge for them sometimes. And so, the way I try and think about it is like, is freemium a marketing tool or is it a sales tool? So sales tool is like all the way through the funnel, credit card, sign up. That is super duper hard to do and almost impossible at the enterprise level. And even the companies that are like, PagerDuty, LogMeIn, they are all about land with a freemium generally in some cases, and you're able to just split off even before that because you're looking at the intent, which is genius. No. Very, very cool. But mostly you're trying to figure out how can I get the right person and the right sales touch for this right lead at the right time to come in. And freemium, I think, is very powerful though if it's a marketing channel. Like I think it's a very effective way of finding, as you say, PQLs, right? These product qualified leads where you're talking to people who are engaged, especially in the early days, which is, I don't think you did not learn anything. I think it is really powerful in the early days because, people who are looking for your thing, especially today on the internet, a certain intent-based internet, they're finding your thing. They're like, okay, it's such a painful problem. It's part of the key part of product market fit is a classic, hair on fire problem where literally someone's hair is on fire and you hand them a brick, they're going to smash their head with a brick and pay you for it because it's better than nothing, right? Like, it's better than nothing. And so when you find that thing, they're like, I'm selling bricks, and people are like buying your bricks, you're like, okay, that's the right thing. If you can do that on the internet, I think even before a sales rep, I think that's the right sequence.
Are you guys doing any account-based selling today, focused on specific accounts?
We are, and we have kind of an account-based marketing and selling feature in our product, and so we use it. Yes and no, in that we don't have an outbound motion again, and so it's all, we're doing inbound, and so we're saying we have a strategic target list of people that are assigned to certain reps, even though we're not engaged with them now, and so when we see them come in real time and have conversations, we're routing to the right rep who owns that account. So there are targets that we've set out, but we're not necessarily outbounding those people.
And one way that people implement this process is by leveraging CEOs as much as possible. How involved are you in the deals, and how are teams strategically using you to get a hold of certain people or to accelerate certain processes?
Super involved in it. I'm super involved in the deals. I'm in calls and in meetings. I do a lot of I spend a lot of time in marketing, right, to drive the funnel. And so I'll go to events like this. I'll go anywhere. I'm in the mode, like at this stage of the company, like all my companies, like I'll do anything. Like, oh, there's a talk in Utah. Okay, I'm going to Utah. There's a talk here. I'm going there. And it's just, I find like those things that seem unscalable are always the secret lever points. Like, and it's hard to point kind of linear relationship, but like that's actually what drives it. We'll see people come in all the time that we're like, oh, you know what? The first time I heard this guy talk was in Utah, and we were at this thing, and then I come in 3 months later, and we have this enterprise deal. But like, so that stuff works all the time, so I'm willing to go do that, and I'm willing to jump on calls. And so sales reps are hitting me. If I pulled up my phone right now, all of our sales reps are hitting me. Can you talk to this guy? Can you connect to this guy? Can you talk to the CEO of this company? And so I'm involved in a lot of deals.
And I mean, I know the answer to this question, Daniel, but we've seen that too, right? Where you've spoken at an event, and I asked someone how they heard about Helpful. Oh, I heard your CEO spoke, right? So you're involved in events. What else are you doing at Helpful to really help drive some of the deals?
Yeah, so definitely go out and do the marketing, and because I think what you're doing in the early days, and you're doing it for sure, is you're building a movement around your idea. If you're building it, and by the way, I think sales reps, that term missionary, that's what I really think. I think missionary. You have to appreciate that, especially in almost any early stage technology company that you want to be working for, there's got to be some sort of movement behind it. There's got to be some sort of community of people who feel this pain and who like the new way that you're doing it. I mean, I think I would be looking for a gig like that. And I think that's really powerful. I mean, it definitely can't just be the CEO. Like, you actually have to embody that. And I think, Tricia was here from Salesforce. I was lucky to work there. I was astonished at how much energy is put into making sure that people out there know that message, are like the shock troops of this position. So I think part of my job is to enable you guys to do it. I think I'm definitely, as you know, brought into deals. Now, I would say one thing. One, it's like, you have to be very careful, I think, using the CEO. Sometimes CEOs, like David's here, like daily affirmation was like, please do not be an asshole on the call today. and it was because, asshole is another flip of passionate. Right? I was passionate, right? Customers would hit me with objections. I'd be like, no, that's not true. Let me tell you why, right? Yeah, like, you know what you're talking about, right? And it was fun. I remember, especially like for what, Helpful we're doing, which is a slight change in social behavior when people start using asynchronous video at work, like, they have to get over a hump, right? And people are like, no, I'd never do that. I'm like, of course you're going to do that. Look, here's all the facts. And in Ripple, it was the same thing. Ripple had this feature where you would send people badges at work. And people were like, no, we're never going to do that. That is just childish and immature. And then we'd be like, we put up like a picture of a general in the army. I'd be like, he's got badges on his chest. Is he childish and immature? Like, and you would just have to logically take people through it. And they, you can't do that. That's not very good for selling. So you got to be careful, I think, with a passionate CEO. You have to actually learn how to coach them. Hopefully it was coachable. I think the other thing is you have to also carefully manage the perception of the prospect, right? So we have this thing on Helpful now where, because it's video, it's integrated with Salesforce. As soon as leads come in, I can say hello to them. We have incredibly high response rate, 40, 50% of people who come into the app say hi to our, to Dan or to Kenny as we say hello to them. it would be a bad idea if I did that to every person. They'd be like, what kind of like outfit is this for the CEOs on the phone with me 2 seconds after I sign up? This thing is not trustworthy. I don't want to talk. Like literally talking to the CEO scares the crap out of the wrong prospect. They're like, you're too small for me to deal with and I shouldn't be dealing with you. So I think, obviously we're involved in selling, involved in product, involved in ultimately talking to customers. Like, I think my job, back to the prior question, is I'm involved in learning. I'm trying every day, I'm walking around, I'm asking questions. You know, right? I'm like, what?
Oh, I know.
Ask you questions
all the time. Yeah, all the time.
Well, hang on. There's another type of question that I asked we haven't talked about that's actually pretty important. Is it's not just like learning questions, it's inspection questions, right? And I think that is a key job of any manager. And actually, I think it's like a cultural thing that as a good teammate, you have to understand that that's the job of your CEO, is to ask questions of what you're doing that you're like, I trust, but verify. So inspect, like let's go down, let's go deep. Because the thing you have to appreciate is that a CEO is not talking to every customer that you talk to. They are not seeing the code in the same way as you. They are not on the customer support call. They are not out, they can't physically be there. And so they're asking questions, I think, good ones. I've seen this happen. Like Benioff, literally, it was terrifying. If you got along with Benioff, it's just a barrage of questions. How do you think this person's doing? What do you think this head of sales is? Who should be running this product? What's going on over here? Why is this messed up? And you're like, I don't even know. I have no idea what that thing. I just want to know. And it took a while to figure out that the best CEOs are asking questions to learn from their team. That inspection is not really like second guessing. It's just they literally don't know.
Mm-hmm.
At least I don't know. I don't know what they do.
I don't know.
You both mentioned something interesting about, Daniel, you alluded to with passion. And I think this relates to passion in some sense, but having everyone in the company provide support. Engineers, marketers, execs. It doesn't just fall on the plate of sales or CS. I heard this in the podcast. Like Chen, you've talked about this a lot. Can you elaborate, DC, on what you're doing and how you've done that at your past companies?
Yeah, so we've done it in 3 companies now, right? We do it all the time now. We do 100% at Drift, where everyone, first we did it at Performable by accident because we didn't have support people, so we were too cheap, so we said everyone has to do support, including the engineers, and every engineer went crazy and said that the time's too valuable, I can't to focus, blah, 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 and so I forced them all to do support.
Walk them over.
Yeah. So I made them submit, and so they ended up doing support, and then what I noticed was when they started to do support, like the feedback loop started, right? And we were able to, in the end, both there and then at HubSpot, like give them an insane amount of autonomy, right? These engineers, in terms of what they were building, because we knew we had this feedback loop, and so they were solving problems for customers that they didn't want to solve before because they didn't believe me or the PM or Kenny saying something because he might have an ulterior motive. But when they heard it 5 times from 5 different customers in the same day, then they were just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go fix it, right? And that happened all the time, and we're like, but you told me you couldn't fix it. You told me you had to re-platform to fix this thing. And it's like, yeah, they kept bothering me with the same questions, so I just fixed it. So we saw that feedback loop. We saw the benefit of doing that. And then, so we carried it on at HubSpot, and then now at Drift, we do it, and everyone, including every salesperson, actually the salespeople fight over it because they want to do it because they close ops in it pretty quickly. And so they actually fight for time. So all of us do support in our own, using our own product kind of in real time.
So, by the way, remember just to link that answer about walking someone over the desk and understanding. Remember I told you about the bug problem at WordBrain? Do you know what that #1 intervention that was like massive change of decreasing the bug backlog? We took the level 3 support guy for the #1 product with the #1 bugs, and we moved him upstairs 2 stories, and he sat next door to the engineers who made that product. That was all we did, was take the support guy. He took his calls sitting next to them. All of a sudden, all the bugs started going away.
Totally.
Because instead of like a 6-month loop around the company of prioritization, who's in charge of this, and they would literally swivel chair and be like, can you fix it? Yeah, I can fix that. I'll just do that.
We all do support at Drift, and we have this customer advocates we just started to do that help us as well. And they sit within engineering teams. Every engineering team has one, and so like they're dealing with a lot of issues that are coming in that makes it past all of us or my off hours and stuff like that. And the engineers actually really like it. It actually decreases response time on those issues.
The thing that like it sort of goes to theme of your questions about like, what are you looking for? I'm still thinking. The other thing you're looking for early on, empathy. Because what you're really describing is how do you close the empathy gap of understanding what the customer faces with the people who are building the product and delivering it. They're super well-meaning. They want to make a great product. It's actually interesting, like sales and engineering always conflict. But the funny thing is, like, salespeople want to do right by their customer. Engineers want to build things that people want to use. They hate that it's broken. Yes. And it's really about getting them the good kind of feedback that helps them understand what customers want. So, Ripple, has anyone seen the movie Clockwork Orange, by the way? Anyone ever seen it? It's a great movie. Yeah, too young. Depressing. Netflix, you can watch it all now. Anyways, watch it. It's a bit graphic and a little crazy, but it's a great movie, Stanley Kubrick. Anyway, so for those of you who've seen it, there's a scene where they kind of force this basically a degenerate criminal to watch a lot of crime. He has to watch it for hours. They let him prop his eyes open with toothpicks, and he can't. It's like that's his condition. He has to watch this crime, and then when he walks out, he never wants to harm a fly. That's the treatment. So we created, I call it a Clockwork Orange test for developers. Literally, at Ripple, I made them all sit in one room, and we got like, it was so basic. We got like someone off of Craigslist to come upstairs to the office. They had to go down to the Aroma and actually made the engineers, this is like terrible. They had to go to Aroma and walk up to somebody and ask them to come upstairs, which was like breaking their heads. They had to come upstairs, bring somebody upstairs, and then they would sit down and pay them like $50 to like log in and go through the first time user experience of Ripple. And so all the engineers were in the other room with like a flat screen, which was just Skype sharing the screen, and they put like a conference call so they could hear what was being said. And one person sat in the room and just guided the user through. Okay, please start logging in. Okay, could you please try and do this? And like, you know, the first time, the engineers are like, this person's an idiot, what kind of moron did you find? On the fifth one, they're like, we need to work here all night to fix this. This is a terrible thing. Like, we're hurting people. We're bad people. Look what they're doing. So anything you can do, they're very good people, but anything you can do to lessen the empathy gap. So yeah, Mike McDermott at FreshBooks, every new employee spends, I think, a month on support. We haven't gotten there yet, but everybody is answering support. Everybody's on it, and like that's what you have to do. It's a great thing. But one last thing I'd say though, early stage rep, you have to know how to talk to product and engineering people so that you get what you need for your customer. You are not a product designer. Do not tell a product designer or an engineer what to build. Don't tell them, just put the button here. Like they needed this option. Can you make that button? They'll never listen to you, and probably just suggesting, like probably because you don't want your engineers selling for you in your company, that you're better at selling than being a product engineer. Most people. Let them be product people and engineers. What you're good at is empathy and listening to problems. Tell them problems. A customer needs to figure out a way to bulk upload 1,000 contacts. Figure that out for them. Every customer has that problem. They can't do it, it's blocking signups, right? A customer cannot figure out how to build culture or their own company thing. Maybe you guys can figure out how to make the badges customizable or something like that. Every time you talk to them about problems, you'll get a response, and I think that the best sales reps every time are the ones who build relationships with product managers and engineers, and they're the ones, you know why? Because A, they trust them, and they trust them to build, and they don't kid yourself, your stuff goes up the prioritization ladder because of exactly that, like,
the relationship.
There's so much slack that engineers have to be like, yeah, I'll just fix that.
Yeah.
Second, you have customers, you need to be referenced in your territory. Engineers and product people love you. Guess who gets the love to fix your customers' problems first? So
third, they're open to bribery.
Yeah.
Cookies,
donuts,
food.
Last question, quickly, something that people can walk away with, and then we'll go to the Q&A from the audience. Favorite books? What are your favorite books that you recommend to the team? I know you both have thousands. I hear about it all the time. But what are your top 2 or 3 books that you can recommend to the audience that they can walk away with by tomorrow?
It's a difficult question. So I talk about books a lot, write about them a lot, and we talk about seeking wisdom. There's so many. I don't know, one that we've been using a lot within Drift is Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink, and he has a new book out on that. And so ex-Navy SEAL, commander, whatever. Anyway, it's just about taking ownership. It's an easy book to read. One book that we give to everyone on the team is called The One Thing.
Yep.
Right, and and that's another book that you can read in 2 hours. Pretty simple to read, and it basically just teaches people how to prioritize, right? And it basically is a whole book on one little passage from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is like to focus on big rocks first, and then small rocks after, but most of us are really good at just focusing on tiny little rocks, and that's why I hate to-do lists, I hate tasks, I hate all those kind of tools, because they train you to kind of think of all of those things as having equal weight, when in reality there's probably only one big thing that you can do each day to move something forward. That might take you all day, or multiple days, or that might take you 10 minutes, and so like, let's do that first, and then fill in the day with the rest. So that book's really good. I don't know, so many other books. Too many books, but those are the ones I would start with. Oh, and Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield. Great book. Okay.
I read your blog, or I read your Twitter feed, and it inspires me. No shit, all the time. I read your stuff, like, okay, I gotta work harder. Yeah, the great thing about reps and sets, which is actually a great insight, just that like, and same thing about the rock, right? And I was talking to our team today about it, is like, sometimes you're trying to, focus is necessary because, especially early on, if you're trying to like move a rock or break a rock, you have to literally hit it 50, 60 times with the same sledgehammer, and nothing changes. You just got to keep doing it. You know that process, those reps and sets, and all of a sudden it just cracks open. Books. Okay, so one book I really like is a book called Search Inside Yourself, and it's a book not about sales tactics or anything like that. It's kind of actually about meditation, but it's about a scientific approach to it. It's like why biologically, neurobiologically this works, and more importantly, why it is actually linked to success in business. And it's based on a course taught at Google called Search Inside Yourself, and it's the #1 leadership course at Google. To take it, you have to kind of apply, and it takes a while to get in. And it basically teaches management how to meditate, but how to be mindful really, and how to do the things that allow you to focus, how to put yourself in a state where you can focus, how to put yourself in a state when you're with a customer that you have this like matrix-like ability not to be an asshole, but to kind of just listen and then breathe and pause. And I actually have found it to be very, very helpful, very effective, and it's not like in any way kind of touchy-feely, and that sort of, if you're kind of a analytical thinker and you're like, oh, I don't know about mindfulness and meditation, not so much, and then you read the book, you're like, okay, makes sense. Another book, totally practical, and actually think really useful because I think it's an epidemic of bad writing, and in particular bad like email writing and copywriting, is a book called The Elements of Style. And Elements of Style has been around for a super long time. It was written at Cornell by a professor who was fed up with students who didn't know how to write. And I know you're like looking at me, you're like, you're literally suggesting I read a book on grammar and spelling, and yes, you should, because it's like 50 pages long. And if you internalize the message of what it tells you how to write concisely and to the point. And I'm sure I've been lucky in my life to interact over email, maybe unlucky, I don't know, with a number of billionaires, 100 millionaires, super hyper successful people. And other than one, who's a bit of an anomaly, what do you think they all have in common? What do you think?
Yeah, they're good at communication.
Super short email, like very crisp, very good writing. What do you think the best salespeople are good at doing? Positioning. They know how to use ideas and concisely get it. What are the great product marketers know how to do? It's all this simple idea. And actually, I think this book, which is about how to write clearly and like not embarrass yourself by confusing don't teaches you how to do it. Okay, that's my rant for the grammar book. Last thing would be a book called The Toyota Production System.
What?
Toyota Production System.
Yeah.
I know it sounds ridiculous also. It's this like philosophical treatise translated from Japanese. But if you've ever read about like the lean startup or agile software or quality-based production, or all this like huge amounts of about this idea of continuous learning, the idea of how do you build agile teams, the idea of flow, all of these ideas came from this single book which was a really interesting story about how Toyota, after World War II, was basically destroyed, and their competitors had like enormous scale. I also find the story very inspiring as a startup person. Competitors had GM, Ford, massive factories, you could pump out tens of thousands of cars, and the Japanese are like, what do we do? We're skunked. And they figured out by this Toyota production system an approach that was the exact inversion of mass scale, non-customization. It was all about high velocity, high quality, and the way they got there was respect for people. We think people can learn, we're going to give them the tools and the energy to build very small batches continuously learning. And so many of the things, like, how many of you, by the way, have a board up in your sales bullpen that's got like sales figures or numbers or anything like that? Anybody have one of those things? Yeah? That's called Andon. That came from this book, this Japanese team that figured out, oh, if we let the production workers know what's going on, they would actually have some feedback. So I'd read this book. It's like the sun source of a ton of other management theory, and really deep, believe it or not.
Yeah.
None are sales-based books, which is really interesting. That's something.
Do you have a good sales-based book? I don't think there is one.
I mean, there's some
I've
current ones that are relevant.
Selling machine, this, that, whatever.
Yeah, I mean less about methodology,
really
more about like
influence.
what Robert's wrote, like sales acceleration formula.
Sure, but that's
But that's not
really
methodology as much as it is like how what someone did in practice, what they implemented, and how that impacted the team. I think that's relevant.
I think those are all retrospective.
You don't get it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, let's have Q&A. I'm not qualified to have this discussion. Great, gentlemen.
Don't call him Roberto. He's going to come talk to him.
I'll tell him.
Great.
He's not talking to you.
What the rep said. What was that? You didn't do that.
Hey, I'm Eric from Flanswell. What happens to MacGyver as the company grows?
So they become problems. Right? So like within companies. So like the classic, the awesome MacGyver kind of person, whatever the role is, usually becomes the troublemaker as the company grows. And so sometimes, rarely they find a good role within the company, and a lot of times they move on to something else, right? And so it's a skill that is amazing, and people are, I don't see it in a sad way because I'm kind of a MacGyver myself. I think people are great at specific contexts, right? And so like they may be great for a specific stage. It doesn't mean that you're going to, very few people make it to those subsequent stages. That's why when you see someone like Benioff is amazing, because how do you go from that, you know, garage stage to a $10 billion, $46 billion, or whatever the billions are, based company? Like the reason that that's worth talking about is because no one can actually make those jumps in stages, and so the MacGyvers usually don't make it. And so the reason, same reason that growth, like a role, VP of growth, or someone like a growth marketer, usually, and I know like all the well-known growth marketers, like they usually don't last long within companies because by their very nature, they are troublemakers, and after a while, they become just too much fucking headaches for everyone because they keep disrupting everyone's flow, and then they have to go. So.
I mean, and the other thing that can happen is, if you're lucky, you have a CEO who figures out to keep throwing, because if the business is growing, there's always new stuff. Oh, you like this? Guess what? Now you're opening Australia. Oh, now you're going like, I was a bit of a troublemaker too. How did I end up fixing this bug problem? Because the CEO was like, that'll keep you busy. Yes. You know, like that basically gets you out of trouble, and you clearly don't mind pissing people off. Someone told me it's like, you break a lot of glass, but you get things done. So that's what happens to those folks. Or they leave and start their own companies. Like I think it's not an accident, both in Boston, right? You can look at like the like lineage of all the people that you know, or in Toronto, right? Like the people who worked with us in the early days at WorkBrain, that was like now, 2000, right? That there are like dozens of people who started companies because they were all in that early stage where it was like just crazy shit was happening all the time. We're like, okay, we got to figure this out. How are we going to do this? And then they kind of grew up only, that was that environment, that was the formative learning. I think imprinting actually in early career makes a difference. And so you kind of just think that's how you do things. And once you, sounds so inspiring, but like once you have the freedom to try and do things and figure out that you can actually solve problems, like the worst thing, I have 4 degrees. The worst thing about school is that it tries to teach you that what they're teaching you is the thing they're teaching you. That there's like something special in the knowledge. The main thing you're learning is how to learn. And you can continuously figure things out. Those people can grow if they can keep trying new things.
If I'm not mistaken, HubSpot was the only company that you joined after the acquisition.
Oh yeah, so all my other companies that were acquired, I left at day 0. See ya, I'm out.
Too much of a troublemaker.
Well, I had no interest in it, and the only reason I stayed at HubSpot was because I had to break everything and rebuild it all, and so that was interesting. And but I think troublemakers, as long as you're in a fast growth company, you can have those ops. But I also think the flip side, I think it's it's very sad to try to keep someone in a slow growth company if they are that person, because they're dying inside. That kind of person is just dying every day, right, in that kind of environment. So,
Question is
Alex.
yeah.
Both of you talked a lot about empathy and it being a key driver in terms of creating context, cultural context. The one pattern that I see, so I just moved back, I went to university in Toronto, I was working in Alberta, I moved back to Toronto. And the one thing I see is that you were talking the science of meditation, or the science of empathy, there's an unwillingness for a lot of people find themselves in places of power, like CEOs, etc., to truly understand the context of a lot of other Canadians, right? Just to give you an example, I was at a startup that was selling to smaller businesses, and I've actually sold to small businesses in person in Alberta, and I recognize their challenges. The CEOs were coming from a place of great privilege, etc., and there was this huge, I could just see this huge disconnect in empathy and context and story and narrative, right? What it's like to sell to someone who's actually living every day off their paycheck. And so, how do you think we can move around? I mean, it's a collective responsibility, but it's also, you don't necessarily have the personal incentive to do that, but as a system as a whole, how do we create an environment that facilitates that true empathy, that true narrative? Because we're all living very, very different narratives.
Hell of a question.
Deep. Super deep. Well, hey, I'll take a shot at it. It is a deep question. I think a couple things. One is, I think companies actually are not just about making money. They're actually, I try to do this now because it's creating community, or creating a thing. Like, a company is a very powerful thing for social good, not that that's the main goal. By achieving its goal of satisfying customers, you create jobs, you do all these things. Okay, so you're in this environment, and everyone talks about values these days, about what are the values that you live. I think that CEO who has no empathy, I think those are dinosaurs that are going to go out of business. Like, I actually think that's a competitive disadvantage over time, certainly in a city like Toronto. And so the question around values is like, what do you value as a company? Do you spend time talking about things like empathy, things like diversity, who you're hiring, where do you spend energy on those things? Like, at the end of the day, the answer to your question is, I think people have to have both companies that allow them to be human and live value-filled lives, and also companies that recognize that it's not just about, profits. Like, that's the only thing that matters. It's not. You're actually trying to build a thing that has impact on the organization, right? Many of you probably work for companies now that have this 1-1-1 challenge that Mr. Benioff started, that Mark started, and his point was, he was like, look, people think that, like, I have to wait until I'm done Salesforce to make all this money and then give it back. And he's like, I don't want to live my life that way. I want this place to give back all the way through, right? So I think there are companies that are doing that. We did that. We put 1% of the company into a trust the day we started the company, saying, okay, we're going to give back. I think that's the only answer to your question. I think those people, and by the way, I just wouldn't worry. Like, just look at the news, right? Like, we are living through somewhat of a sea change, or I think, people whose values are incompatible with where the zeitgeist is, they're not thriving anymore, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Question, one last question. Over there.
Hi, I'm Andrea Matto, co-founder and CEO of Lab 141. We're an advanced manufacturer. I'm actually based in Brooklyn, New York, but I spent some time in Toronto. Oh, I'm pretty loud. I don't think I need this. So, culture is something that is really essential. And if you don't create it, it's created just because you founded the company. How did you actively create your culture? And if you didn't, what do you think it is based on your non-active cultural creation?
Yeah, so I'd say spend a lot of time thinking about culture, because I've created companies in the past that I didn't actually like the culture of the company I created, so I think about it a lot. I'd say at Drift, we probably spent too much time in the early days thinking and worrying and kind of writing and about culture, because I think culture is kind of I kind of view it as the sum of the people that you bring on and the attitudes and behavior that you're willing to tolerate. So you can talk about, I think everyone tries to front load it and talk about it and write and do all this stuff, but like they're not willing to do the hard calls of like, I'm gonna fire this person because they're not living up to it every day, because they're a good performer, they sell a lot, he writes good code, and we can't hire engineers. And so like, to me, it's those small things every day of like, are you willing to actually take a stand every day to live and kind of and kind of keep pruning. I kind of view it as like a garden, right? If you want a garden, you have to actively prune it every single day. And so that's how I think you can influence culture. I don't think writing a bunch of things is going to make a culture, because it's just the people that you tolerate.
Yeah, if I could borrow your metaphor before, you don't like task lists.
Yeah,
and I don't like them either. Like, I do them, and then what I realize is, like, this is a tactic. I like literally copy a new task every day. And if something is the same task has been on for 2 or 3 days, I just stop writing it. Because what I learned is that I have a pretty good internal calendar to focus on one big block, right? And it'll drive people around me crazy, but I'm just like, no, I'm not paying my bills. I'm not paying my credit card. I'm not taking care of that. Just one thing has to happen. That's the one thing that matters today. Right, and so
it's the same thing.
Yeah, no, I can't even.
Like Mr. Magoo.
Yeah, I am. I'm like, really, people, like, you're forgetful and you don't take care of things, and it's ridiculous. How could you be successful? And it's because I'm like relentless about if it's on the list and I'm not doing it. It's because I'm not right. So the reason I talk about that story, also link it to the task thing, was I think culture and values are exactly the same thing. You can make a whole bunch of lists, but what you actually do every day, that is your culture. There's no getting around it. How do you actually behave? So to answer your specific question, and there's a great post on this by, I think you remember too, a really wonderful person. Her name's Molly Graham. She's head of culture at Facebook. She's fantastic. She now is COO of the Chan Zuckerberg thing. And she wrote this great long post called "Your Culture is Your CEO." And that was her point. She most famously, you know, at Facebook, you have those big posters like, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" and "We're 1% done." She did that by interviewing Mark repeatedly over a year and keep asking him, like, what are we doing? What are you saying? Why are we doing this? So rather than like, what do you think our culture should be? She just observed that these were the things that were being said and done, and kind of echoed it back. And then he was able to be, yeah, that's kind of what I think we are. So then something follows from that, which is that you're asking me, what do I try and do to do culture? It's literally like get coaching myself, meditate myself, like try and apologize if I do shitty things and lose my temper, which I do, it happens. It's a very stressful job to be a CEO, not that excuses it. Like, I realize that the way, like every day when I come in, Bob Sutton, a professor at Stanford, has this famous study where like he talks about how bonobos, like the monkey social primates, we are all social primates, they stare at the alpha primate like 20 times a minute. They're always looking at what the alpha, and so the lesson is like people are looking at you. And so again, back to culture, every day I come in, I'm like, I have to be in a positive mood. You know, if it doesn't matter if my kid's sick or my wife yelled at me or like whatever, it doesn't matter, not their problem. I gotta come in, up, energetic, pumped. Alex is sitting right behind you, he's like, now I know why you're so chipper in the morning. But really, it's so infectious. So those are things like you have to be super in control of your own emotional state. And I too have also been involved in situations where I knew that I was a root cause of a culture that was like not what I wanted it to be, because you know people saw how I would behave, and so you know you simply can't do that. I think the last thing, it's not only how you behave when somebody's acting in non-accordance. It's like values is what you do when you have to make tough decisions, is what you're saying, right? Yep. It's not easy to talk about values until it's hard, right? Money's on the line or something like that. The flip side is also, who else do you bring into the company? So I'm not saying about like hire for fit or hire for culture. That's actually not what I'm saying. I'm saying about being very intentional about people who can work in the work design that you have. So at Helpful, Farhan, my co-founder, very, very adamant about pairing. Okay, pairing means our developers don't have two developers, two computers, they work on two different things. We have one screen, they parallel on, one set of keyboards, and they code together all the time. There's a long whole discussion about that, but one of the key things that makes that possible is we just hire to make sure people can do that. They can handle that culture where they've got someone with them all the time. Have to be collaborative, that kind of thing. So you're hiring and really thinking about the people that you bring in early, they have to be aligned in the values that you have. So it's a long answer to your question, but I think it's something I've thought a lot about, obviously thought a lot about it.
Totally, and so we do something, like we said earlier, all engineers have to talk to customers, and so other CEOs and companies are like, how do you get engineers to talk to customers? My engineers won't talk to them. It's like, well, they don't have a job here if they don't, we wouldn't hire them. So like, it's like you're doing it every single day, and after a while you wake up, and guess what, 100% of them are willing to talk to customers.
But we get that all the time. We're like, we could never pair, my engineers would never pair. We're like, how do you get them to do? We're like, because it's the number one thing we're trying to figure out is, can you pair? Can you sit beside someone? By the way, pairing works really well in sales and marketing. We started to do it. It's a very powerful tool because you're like really locked in with this other person for an extended period of time. You don't get distracted. You kind of hold each other accountable, but you get a lot of work done. It's another conversation.
All right, I can do this all night. I'm sure most people can. I want to thank you both for being here tonight. Quick round of applause.